podcast. Today is going to be super exciting because, God, Star Wars film that's been my favorite for a super long time recently was surpassed, which is okay. But we're talking Empire Strikes Back. I have an awesome crew of people. And yeah, I'm just excited to get into this right here on the high ground. Hello and welcome, my excellent guests.
Hi.
Hi. Yeah. So we are. There we go. All right. Perfect. So we're jumping in here. We're going to be talking about Empire Strikes Back tonight. But I want to start by having my awesome guests go around and introduce themselves. So we're going to go around and what we're going to ask is, who are you? Where can we find your awesome content? And I tried something a little different with my icebreaker. For the sake of the galaxy, you have to choose to challenge either Luke or Vader. And you can challenge them to do anything. But you have to win, otherwise the universe is doomed. Which one are you challenging? And what are you going to challenge them to? All right. I know it's going to be a tough one, but I believe in all of y'all. I will go to props to history first.
Well, my real name is Mike, but I'm known online as Props to History. I'm an industry prop maker and special effects technician, but I'm also a film and prop historian, and I can be found online pretty much anywhere at Props to History. I'm a one-trick pony. I stick with the same name for everything. So
it's good branding. Good branding.
It is. And as far as the question, it would be Vader, and it would be Tekken 2. Because I am a beast at Tekken 2. And I don't think Vader's ever played it. So
perfect. I love it. I would love to see that as a contest though. Like, I'm not even sure his suit, like even in, by the way, this could be the character in any era, but I'm picturing Empire Strikes Back, and I don't even think his suit would allow him to hold a control.
Automatic win.
It'd be pretty close. And so do you want me to call you Mike or Props or?
Yeah, Mike is fine. I mean, it's weird when people call me Props to my face. It happens a lot, and it's my own fault. But Mike is fine.
It is a little weird when my wife calls me Chaco, but yes, I'm Chaco or Brandon. Y'all can say either. But yeah, how about you, Emily? I'm happy you put the name Emily because I can't say the username to save.
Yes, that's what I was going to start off with. Is like similarly in the vein of usernames versus names. So my username is Silmar Emily, which is a play on the Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien, and my name Emily. Sometimes on podcasts or just anywhere, especially people are like Silmarillion. And I'm like, it's fine. Just call me Emily. Yes, there's Summer Emily on.
I'm happy I'm not
TikTok.
alone.
No, you're not alone. I think one person has ever said it right, and I was like, you said it right.
Yeah, Pep makes fun.
It's like more of a look for looks thing than for speaking thing. But yes, you can find me on TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram, all at Summer Emily because it's super weird. So nobody had taken that yet. And for my what would I challenge Luke and or Vader to, I struggled with an answer that wasn't just like go to therapy. I would challenge Vader in like who's better at therapy competition because I think almost anybody would win that. So I think that's the answer that I'm going to stick with.
It's a dual-edged sword too, because even if you lose, he probably is more well-adjusted, and
exactly. Same with Luke. I feel like they could both from that.
Perfect. And how about you, Char?
Well, I'm known, my name is Charlie, but a lot of the people that I've known on social media call me Char, but I'm J on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter. I mainly post on TikTok, but I'm a Star Wars creator. I talk about a lot of lore, and I like being an outlet for different Star Wars fans. And where you can find me also on the Pod Ones podcast every Thursday night as we are covering a Clone Wars rewatch. And on Friday, we have a collaboration with Stream Lounge to host a watch along for Kenobi every Friday up until Andor. So that's where you can also find me. And for my challenge, I would probably one-on-one Luke Skywalker in basketball. I feel like
He took my answer.
Brandon knows. I'm a pretty tall chap. I Mark Hamill's what 5'7", 5'8", maybe. But I think I have a height advantage on him, and I'd say I'm quite a decent baller. So
With the Force, he's got some
what I'd
hops
say.
though. He might dunk on you once or twice, but
Maybe.
I'd pay to see that game. I'd pay to see that game. And how about you, Rob?
Well, my name is Robert Butler. I am a filmmaker and writer and director out of Michigan. You can find me pretty much anywhere on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter as Breezy2345. Like props to history, I am a one-trick pony there. It's good branding just to keep everything the same. So I agree with that practice. And I would say initially my answer was going to challenge Vader to a basketball game, but I'm going to change it and challenge Vader to a karaoke contest. I don't think Vader can sing.
He might
It'd
just
be all
William
opposite.
Shatner it.
He definitely doesn't have very good breath support, so
Right.
I feel like
So
you
I think
have
I
that
can win that.
advantage on the high notes for sure.
And now
All
I'm curious:
right.
has James Earl Jones ever done karaoke? Like, can we actually watch him do karaoke?
He has done he's actually sang in a couple of his film roles, and he has a magnificent baritone. So if it's James Earl Jones you're going against, that's one thing.
So-
But it's
So,
it's
Rob, you might
Vader.
have some competition.
You're right. No, I didn't think about that. Ah, damn. I gotta rethink that. But yeah.
I'm just picturing, because it being Anakin under the mask and being like, you know what we're gonna do, right? And he plays "Never Gonna Give You Up."
Yeah, I challenge Hayden, not James Earl Jones. Hayden to a singing contest. There we go.
Yeah.
much better. Awesome. That's awesome. And let's see here. We have quite a few awesome people in the chat. I have Corelli Coffee Works. Haley is challenging Vader to do a compelling makeup tutorial video.
That's a good one.
That's Chris, Star Wars Laura, I challenge Vader to having the high ground. Darthman 86, I'm going with Star Wars Racer on the N64. You don't think Vader has that game?
He's a
I'm
great
just
pilot.
saying,
I mean,
I could picture him having that version of that game in universe.
I mean, in the Clone Wars arc that we covered recently, there's in Anakin's quarters in the Jedi, in this like little apartment in the Jedi Temple. You can see posters of Quadraneros and Sebulba. So I mean, he's definitely playing video games of the race. So
oh yeah.
Yeah,
we're like, let's relive some past.
that's awesome. But yeah, okay. So we're gonna jump into the discussion. First, I do have a quick lightning round for everyone. I gotta do this with everyone so that I can judge you personally, but not publicly. But I need to get your top three Star Wars films, right? Just the top three, right? I'll go with Emily.
Me first. Well, I think you already know what my number one is. It's right. Number two is probably A New Hope. And then for three, I would say The Force Awakens.
Okay, perfect. Char?
Number one is, you guessed it, Empire Strikes Back. Number two is A New Hope, and then number three is Return of the Jedi.
All right, full on
Original
OT.
trilogy. I like it.
Rob, I'm excited to hear yours as a filmmaker.
Well, number one, of course, would be Empire. Empire's like 1A for me, and then Revenge of the Sith is like 1B for me. So it's like those two I hold very high up as films, and then I would probably go with A New Hope would be my third favorite.
Okay. Okay. And then last but not least, we got Mike.
It would be Empire, Rogue One, and A New Hope.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
I like the condensed little time period there. No, I always like to hear people's top three because that you can kind of get a sense of like, okay, this is the type of things that they love in these, and
Mine have absolutely nothing to do with the story, though. It has everything to do with the special effects used.
Well,
That's what draws me to film is special effects and model work and that sort of thing. So
that's why I'm excited to hear any extra tidbits that you might be able to share tonight.
Oh, especially with the release of Light and Magic too.
Oh, that's going to be good.
Yeah,
it was released today. It should be out right now. I have not had a chance to check it out, but I'm excited to. I might have to do a separate episode just on that, and we'll see. We'll see if we can have them on. Okay. And so yeah, Rob might have to drop out for just a moment, but is totally fine. But yeah, sorry that threw me off. No, I'm excited because of just the preview for that and how like they were like the rebellion, how Lucas like rebelled against the film industry when starting off. Just simple things of like not putting people's names up at the beginning of the film because he didn't want to take away from the story and stuff like that. That he had the way he formed his own ILM itself was just so punk rock that like I can't wait.
He was fined for that, like pretty heavily. I feel like I remember reading.
Yeah, he was fined very heavily for a lot of that stuff, and we also almost had, I believe it was Empire, nearly directed by Steven Spielberg, but because of the Directors Guild and the fights with how they did that, they wouldn't allow it.
Yeah. Which I mean,
yeah, an Empire.
Yeah,
an Empire. The cost of the movie came majorly out of George Lucas's pocket. Like it was a lot of his own money just to make sure the film came out.
And it was kind of the same with A New Hope as well, which is technically a low budget film, and they made do with a lot of stuff, and a lot of their vaunted special effects. When you start to look back at them, were it was a whole lot of just getting it done any way they could, and it doesn't show that they did it brilliantly.
Yeah, I mean, Hoth seems like an expansive, world, and when you find out like no man, they were inside the hotel shooting at a door. That stuff is so cool to me.
With the Norwegian army.
All right, well, so everyone, I'll kind of open this up. Let's see, I'll have Charlie start it, but anyone else can go after him. I want to ask where your geeky journey began, and if you have any like special memories surrounding this film. I know it's your favorite.
So my ascension into nerdhood began a few weeks before Revenge of the Sith came out, because I was born in 2000 and it was 2005, and I was a youngin' when the prequels came out, and I first saw Attack of the Clones because I remember when Revenge of the Sith was coming out, they were replaying all of the old or the previous movies on TNT, and I happened to just have Attack of the Clones on, and I was just so in awe of what I was seeing on the screen with all the ships and the lightsabers and the characters and the world building. I was just so shook by everything that I was watching, and it was just spectacular. And I think what really kicked off what made me love like science fiction and heroes and everything was I was in first grade, and I remember sitting across my friend, and he had a Spider-Man lunchbox. I was like, I want to learn about this character a bit more. So that was like my introduction to superheroes. Because I was like, oh yeah, I want to get a Spider-Man action figure. I want to get a Superman. I want to get a Iron Man. I wanted to get every single superhero when I was a kid. But then as time went on, I was like, which one do I like more? Do I like Star Wars more? Do I like DC and Marvel more? Do I like superheroes? And I was like, I eventually just liked Star Wars more. And the funny thing was, I didn't really get into loving Empire until I was about 14, 15 years old. Because when I was a kid, the story just felt, I don't know. And when I'm a kid, I didn't really understood the story that was happening with Vader and the Empire and Han and Leia's relationship. I didn't understand that as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
But as I like grew up and I started to like, you know, get closer with friends and develop human relationships, and I was like, wow, this movie has a lot of weight. It's super important and it's sad. Like our heroes get the short end of the stick and they fail. And I mean, when you're a kid, like you're super optimistic. You always want your heroes to win. But it's one of these movies that tells you like, hey, good guys don't always finish first. And this is why I love it to this day. So
Awesome.
and also it introduced my favorite character of all time, Boba Fett.
Okay. I mean, you could have watched the holiday special for that, but
I could.
Yeah. Who else? Who else wants to share their geeky journey?
I would say mine is very similar to Charlie's. Like I saw Star Wars: A New Hope when I was 4 years old at my aunt's house in Cleveland. They had the original VHS tapes, and I saw from the very first moment that the cruiser came onto the screen, and you saw the Star Destroyer. I was all in at that point as a 4-year-old. I'm like, what is this? I love this. I don't know what's going on, but I love all the flashing colors and the sounds and everything like that. So it's great. I absolutely loved it since I was 4 years old. And then because before episode 1 came out, they started re-releasing the films as the new editions in theaters. So I remember going to the theaters, like we had like a little dollar theater by our house in Georgia, where they replayed A New Hope, Empire, and Return of the Jedi, and it was like falling in love all over again. Although I was just like 10 at the time, from 4 to 10, it was a journey. Then I come from a family of nerds. Yes, my dad's a nerd. My mother likes to say she's not a nerd, but she's a Trekkie, so that's one of the highest level of nerddoms there is. So she's definitely a nerd. A lot of people know my little brother, Star Wars lawyer. He's definitely a nerd. So I come from a long line of nerds. So it's genetics. So my dad was a huge comic book collector when he was a kid, and he kind of passed that on to us when we were kids as well. So it's it's like a family business. Nerddom is family business.
Beautiful. I love it.
Well, I am very likely the oldest person here. I am a product of the 80s. I grew up when Star Wars was at its height, when it first came out. I have the vaguest of memories of going and seeing Return of the Jedi at the base theater, March Air Force Base in California, when I was 3 years old, when it came out in '83. And I do not have any memories of that time where I didn't have Star Wars toys, because they were absolutely everywhere. Everyone had them. It was a status symbol to have an AT-AT, with amongst the kids that I played with at the time. So I don't remember a time when I wasn't steeped in that. And of course, in the 80s, actually almost the whole point of Star Wars was to sell toys, and that's where Lucas made his money on them. So they were you couldn't kick a rock and not find one. And at the
Don't
time,
pull that to Gary Kurtz.
Yeah, like in the 80s, every cartoon was an advertisement for toys. So that it began almost as soon as I could walk. The nerdiness, the association with Star Wars. So it's always been there. And my father was a Trekkie, so he immediately grasped onto it. He immediately was like, "Here's something weird and sci-fi, and get into it." And he was all for it. And I do not remember a time when I wasn't a nerd. So
I love it.
Yeah.
Last but not least, Emily.
I can definitely relate to that. I also was raised by nerds. Both my parents are pretty sound in their identity as nerds. My dad will always tell me about like what it was like when Star Wars first came out, and like everybody, he was probably like maybe 10 at the time, and he was like, everybody's birthday party that year was going to see Star Wars, so he probably saw it like 6 or 7 times in the theater. I also have a brother, so I kind of relate my like younger years experience with Star Wars as something that was forced upon me. I was not particularly into it, but like every night after dinner, my brother would want to watch Star Wars. So like my first memories of watching Star Wars was just like very begrudgingly my dad putting in like the VHS tape after dinner because that was all my brother wanted to watch. And you know, he had all the toys. I've been smacked with a plastic lightsaber more times than I can count. So I didn't get into Star Wars really until Force Awakens. When The Force Awakens came out, I was in college. We went to go see it as a family. And I just remember leaving the theater being like almost electrified. Like I just will never forget that feeling of being like, oh, I like Star Wars. Like I didn't really realize it until then that I was like, oh, I like this stuff too. So I've been in the thick of it ever since.
Awesome. And then, I mean, and you guys know my story. It was similar where I was watching a VHS of Empire Strikes Back until it literally broke, until I broke the tape, just wore thin on it. And yeah, it's just always been a part of my life. And I grew up just obsessed with, you know, I have a older sister is 2 years older than me, and I have an uncle that was 2 years older than her. And so I kind of grew up as the youngest brother in this trio. And yeah, my uncle is also a huge nerd. And so it was always Spider-Man, X-Men, and Star Wars, which is just the best way to grow up. But like one scene though that always lives in my heart as a specific like moment in my fandom is the scene where the Falcon gets pulled into the Death Star in A New Hope. And like the scene is so slow and it takes so long, but it's so beautiful. And I can hear the music swelling just thinking about it. And it just really, really makes me happy. But yeah, I always love hearing that because all of us, we come into in different times. We all come from different places and certainly different backgrounds, and it's just super cool that we all can get together over Star Wars. Like Celebration was such an amazing experience just for that reason alone, of just hanging out with just the oddest group of people you wouldn't expect to see walking down the street having a blast and doing karaoke together.
Yes.
So,
Yeah,
I can concur.
that looked like a lot of fun.
no, it really brings everyone together. But
I have,
all right.
I have never been to celebrations. I'm actually going to try and go to next year's in England. So hopefully that'll take place. I'm new to the whole convention thing. I only started going to cons like 3 years ago, and then COVID happened. So
Right.
I've been to 4.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we look forward to London is the goal for me as well. So I should definitely be there. You would have yeah, we'll call it props to London. They did a whole Mandalorian experience at the last one where they had all the props and things from the show. And it's a lot of fun. But
Yeah, I saw a lot of that stuff in other circumstances. So it was cool that they brought it out like that, because Lucasfilm is actually, the archives is getting ready to open a museum. I think they finally broke ground on the museum to put their archives on public display for the first time in history. So, because getting into the Lucasfilm archives is one of the most difficult things in the world. So
Yeah.
that they're putting it on display finally for the world is actually very exciting.
that's really cool. That's super cool. I did not know about that, and I will be going there as soon as I can. All right, let's jump into the film. Oh, sorry, were you saying something, Emily?
Oh no, I was like, put that on my calendar whenever it opens. Just
Okay. All right, so we'll jump to the film, and I like to split it up into acts. That way we don't miss any of the beats, and we can talk about all the cool stuff. Speaking of cool stuff, we have Act 1 on Hoth. Now, my love of Star Wars came from when the special editions were coming out, and watching that. That's when I started to get deeper into it. So my mind, when it comes to Empire, is a special edition, so don't hate me for that. But yeah, I'm curious. We go to Act 1 of the film. All of the parts on Hoth, Luke getting lost and taken. We see the Wampa and all that good stuff, all the way until they escape the planet. What jumps out at you guys as your favorite parts or notable things that you want to talk about?
The opening scene, particularly the Battle of Hoth, from the perspective of special effects, was actually really groundbreaking because stop motion animation had been around for forever. It was not a new thing, but Phil Tippett and the folks at Industrial Light and Magic developed and perfected the method of what's called go motion, where they actually add a bit of blur with each frame that's taken, whereas with stop motion, it's just a frame is taken each time, which made the motion of the AT-ATs and even the ATST, which was introduced in that scene, look more natural. So from the perspective of animation, those special effects were way ahead of their time. And they did the same thing with the Tauntaun. When you see the Tauntaun, which was only about 16 inches tall in reality, it was all done through the process of go motion, which had just recently been perfected by ILM. It wasn't new either. That go motion goes back to 1925, but that they used that scene to show it and perfect it. And that the AT-ATs that you see, there were 3 or 4 different sizes of them. The largest one was about 3.5 feet tall, and the smallest was only about 2 inches tall. It was amazing to me as a young person, like starting to learn how the industry worked, and then realizing that was that pivotal moment where animation changed. And it's in the Battle of Hoth, which for me is awesome. I absolutely love it. And
That's
also
really
that the AT-AT drivers are actually wearing TIE Fighter pilot helmets. They just repainted them, and then they painted them again, so they're gone. The AT-AT driver helmets are gone. Nobody knows what happened though.
That's awesome.
That's what you get out of me, obscure details that no one cares about.
They're great. They're always great.
That's the best part.
Yeah. No, I still think even today, even though some of the scenes do look a little like hokey now, like especially the scene with Luke in the Wampa cave, like the arm kind of sort of like, okay, it's just a little, but it's hard to not acknowledge like how revolutionary that must have been at the time. Like, I think it's very clear that George Lucas really wanted to make a mark on the props and like special effects world, and he like truly went all out, and he just goes right out from the very beginning with this movie with all the special effects.
That scene in the ice cave is also the scene that establishes Rochester, New York as being canon in Star Wars, in the Star Wars universe. Because you can very clearly see Made in Rochester, New York on the base of the lightsaber. If you go back and watch that scene when he's using the Force to pull it from the snow, it very clearly says Made in Rochester, New York, because that's where Graflex made the flash tubes, which is what they made the lightsaber from.
I've always known that it was a reverse, like it was Mark Hamill's lightsaber. I've heard that fact, but I had not heard that one.
Yeah, watch it again and then just pause it when you can see when it closes in on it, when it zooms in, you can see Made in Rochester, New York.
That's funny.
All right, that's awesome. How about you, Rob?
Honestly, the greatest thing that I love about Empire is that we jump basically right into the action. Because with A New Hope, there was a lot of world building. We had to learn who the characters were, who the players were, the Empire versus the Rebels. But in Empire, we get to jump right into the action because we know who everybody is. And so the plot can just start from basically page 1 of the script or, minute 1 of this film. So I loved how we just jump right into the action. Luke is going out to investigate something. He gets captured. And then, you have to have Han to come save him. Then you have the probe, everything like that. It just the build up to Hoth. Or the Battle of Hoth was just amazing because there's no plotting, there's no filler. We jump right into the action to what the story is going to be, the conflict. So that's what I love about the beginning of Act 1. It's just everything just starts moving immediately from the moment after the opening crawl, and that's amazing to see.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Charlie?
I think one of the best parts about the whole Hoth sequence was because in A New Hope at the beginning, you already know who's David and who's Goliath. And then right when the Imperial probe shows up, and Han shoots at it, and then he's like, "Oh, it's self-destructed." And Leia says, "Good thing the Empire knows we're here." And then Riken immediately goes, "We better start the evacuation." Like they were there for 3 years, and they know once they were found, they got to dip, they got to go, or they're done. So it's like it's still relevant. Like even after the Death Star's destruction, they are aware that they still are insanely powerful, and they got to go no matter what. Like they are, if they get caught, the rebellion's over. That's like essentially what happens in the original and the sequels, where it's like, and especially in The Last Jedi, where if they all get caught, the war is over. Like the rebellion's going to lose. But what stood out to me the most was when Luke leaves the Wampa cave, which I don't know why he left the Wampa cave. I mean, I still ask that question to this day. Why did he leave? Like he could have just stayed in the cave with his one-armed friend, and instead of he went out into a blizzard and froze to death. Yeah. And then
he's got meat in there. Like
they could have shared the Tom's.
Exactly. And then when Force Ghost Obi-Wan showed up, we were like, whoa. So that's how he was talking to him when Luke was in the Death Star trench run.
Yeah.
Like this whole movie, we learned so much about the Force that we haven't touched yet from A New Hope. And when he says, "You must go to the Dagobah system. From there you'll meet Yoda, the Jedi Master who instructed me." And then it's just that whole sequence is just so cool. And then we see Bacta for the first time, and then Leia and Luke,
and the red Bacta in the background.
And then we have Luke and Leia, and
I always kind of
and all the fun and games,
sibling kisses.
I just sort of like wrote my eyes up. It's like it's literally too cringe to watch. Like I don't know why. I just can't do it anymore.
I mean, they're from space.
It also further establishes how deep droids are into every aspect of life too.
Yeah.
Because you see so many different droids doing so many different services, and you start to realize, like, oh, droids permeate everyone's lives, which just sort of helps that just a little bit more world building for it too.
I personally also love R2-D2's very clear separation anxiety. Like C-3PO's like, come on, there's nothing we can do, and R2's like, no, like I'm gonna stand here, I'm gonna scan, I'm gonna wait. Like I just think there's so many good callbacks that they use later to show like maybe why is R2 so nervous about Luke being somewhere far away, and it's because of Anakin. Like I just love that they set up a lot of stuff like that.
Yeah, they paid so much attention to the stuff that was put in there,
already,
even if stuff wasn't planned. I love how Pep says Luke broke canon by leaving the cave instead of staying in the warmth. We always laugh because anytime someone makes a decision that seems suboptimal, it's breaking canon for some people.
I remember seeing your video about like it's just for story purpose. There's no reason behind it.
People do.
There is, I think, one of my favorite like lesser known parts about the Rebel base there on Hoth is that in the scene right before they decide to close the blast shield, has anyone, I'm sure a lot of you have heard the name Ralph McQuarrie. He created the look of Star Wars. Ralph McQuarrie actually walks in the background of that scene carrying his portfolio filled with Star Wars concept art. He's actually in that scene. There's a guy walking behind carrying a portfolio. That's Ralph McQuarrie himself.
I did not know that.
I love that they started putting it by the time with Empire Strikes Back, and it's something that's continued throughout Star Wars ever since, is that the artists and the people that work behind the scenes, they put them in the background repeatedly so that they have a place in the film's history.
Yeah, I still laugh every time I see George Lucas as Papanoida. I'm like, this isn't even, he didn't even try, man. He just went
Another thing that I like about Empire, the opening act of, is how they explained Mark Hamill's car accident away. because as a filmmaker, there's several things that can always go wrong during production that you never know, you can never plan for. And so Mark Hamill getting into an accident, he had reconstructive surgery, they had to fix his face, they had to write that into the script of why he looks different. And just that adaptability as a filmmaker to do that, to think about that, which probably was not, a sequence at all in the film, to then add it and then it works a part of the film. I just think that's just an amazing part, because you never really truly understand what can happen on a film set that can go wrong and change your entire film. So I just thought that was clever way to get that his injuries in the film without actually changing what happened, changing Luke's story. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah. And then the other thing we get is we get to see a bit of the Empire. We get to see Vader flexing, in space. And it's choking people through, with the Force, when he's just like, it also opened the door for what we now have in the 2015 Star Wars comic, 2015 Vader comic. He starts out by saying the Rebel Alliance is there and Skywalker is with him, and you're just like, what? You even know who he is? Like,
yeah. That name drop is very.
Yeah. Well,
I remember watching those years later with my dad, who was career military, and in that scene where he just seems to repeatedly like choke out his admirals. I just remember my dad going, "How many admirals does he have on this ship?" Because he's just going through
them. How many
automatic
HR
promotions
violations has he racked up by just killing his employees?
Yeah,
but like Ozzel was kind of a dick.
Yeah, but
well, isn't there a theory that Ozzel was part of the rebellion?
The theory is he was so incompetent that he must have been helping the rebellion on purpose.
Just through his own sheer stupidity.
Yeah.
Like
a Amelia Bedelia type situation going on there. But
one thing I find so interesting is that Vader in Empire only kills 2 people, and it's its own men. He only kills Ozzel and he kills Nita. Those are the only 2 people he defeats. It's his own men.
Yeah. I think about often like how hard it, like how little it makes sense of one person. Like he says, like, Vader, we have probes in everywhere. Like how, and he says, no, they're there. Skywalker's there. Like, can you imagine it making like military sense to just like listen to that person? Like, it just kind of makes me giggle that he's just like, nope, he's there and I'm going there and you're not. And like, what if he had been wrong? Like, what if he wasn't?
Well, nobody would say that to his face if Vader was wrong. If Vader was wrong, nobody would say that. Because that's a lightsaber to the chest or, a choking.
History is full of examples of people just following along out of fear and it all blow up in their face. So which
so the fact that it works out is
ultimately what happened.
But if Vader was a video game character, he would have a plus 100 certainty.
And that's one of the things I love about Vader too, because he didn't go up the chain of command in the military. Like the whole military is formed. People are getting promoted. They're going to the academy and all this stuff. And then there's just this guy, and he's just like there, and you're like, "What do you do, man? Like, where did you come from?" And he's like, "Don't worry about it. Like, I know the boss." So, he's
like the boss's son is in charge of the company now, kind of thing.
Yeah,
exactly.
Well, nepotism involved.
Also, I mean, we get that development of Han and Leia's relationship again. I mean, we kind of touched on the love triangle that's super awkward later, but but it was compelling, when this definitely came out. And if you haven't done it already, and Crilly Coffee Works in the chat said, "Can never look at the Tauntaun the same after from a certain point of view." If you haven't read any of the From a Certain Point of View books, I highly recommend it. It's stories from the random people in the background of these films.
The first chapter of the story is good too, with the probe droid story.
Yeah,
That's one of my
there's a story
favorites.
about the lady operating the probe droids that are going to these worlds, and like, there's a story from the point of view of a Wampa, like
Mhm.
teaching their kid how to hunt and like going around. Like it's wild. Highly recommend. But yeah, all right. So moving forward, we'll jump into Act 2. So the Empire came and they were able to flee and make it off world. From there all the way until I guess the trap is sprung on Cloud City. What jumps out at you guys at this? The first thing I want to say, and I know I say this all of the time if you are watching this on a regular basis, but the asteroid belt sound, music, that score is my favorite in all of Star Wars. It's so whimsical at certain points, it's so daunting at other points, and it is just it goes all over place. It brings in all of the themes that we love, and that's my favorite. That's my favorite piece of music in all of Star Wars because it does everything. And just by listening to that piece, I can watch the movie in my head and just like and feel it. So that's the first thing that jumps out at me. How about you all?
I can't lie, Brandon. I listened to that song about 5 times today.
Love it.
Nah, but talking about the music, one of the greatest musical moments of my life was a few years ago. I think it was like the year before COVID. The Detroit Symphony Orchestra played Empire Strikes Back, and they did the accompanying score underneath it with a live orchestra, and it was amazing. Probably one of the greatest musical moments of my life. Hearing, because I always loved the Empire score, but I gained a greater appreciation for the music of that score while listening to it and seeing it live in person. Just an amazing work that John Williams did on Empire, A New Hope, Star Wars in general. But the music, as you said, is a high point during this act. From that to Yoda's Force theme, Yoda's theme, everything like that. The Luke and Leia's, or the Luke and Han theme, love theme, all those themes in the music played a huge part in the second act of the film, and it stands out for being one of the better parts of the film because of how good it is, how it sets up the scenes, how it adds tension to certain scenes, and it just keeps adding and building until we eventually get to the Vader showdown and the trap. So that's what stands out to me as well, is the music.
Yeah.
Space opera.
Yeah, because a lot of the music for this, everyone sees it as just Imperial March. It's like the cornerstone song of Star Wars. But no, like this movie has so many good songs. Like you got Imperial March, you have Departure of Boba Fett, you have Yoda in the Force, you have Yoda's theme. You also have
Leia's theme.
Yeah, you have Leia's theme.
Leia's theme
And
is
then you have the song when they are escaping Hoth. Okay, I don't know why I'm singing right now. But you get what I mean. Like, there's so many songs in this movie that, like, you remember that stick out to you, and that's what makes it so memorable. And Asteroid Field is one of the most memorable songs. And when it played, when they were in Solo, when they were doing the Kessel Run, when that song was playing, I was like, yes. I was so happy. Out of all the things, out of all the themes of Star Wars, that was the perfect one.
And my brother wants to make sure we talk about Lando's theme. I'm sorry, didn't mean to jump in, but Star Wars Lawyer always wants to talk about Lando and Lando's theme, so make sure we point that out for him.
Good old Chris.
Lando's theme is so regal. You know what I mean? Like, and
it matches his flowy capes. I mean, like, can you imagine walking around with all these beautiful capes and not having that song playing? Like, you just can't do it.
I'm grateful for my parents for this, but that scene made me want to wear a cape all of the time. And they wouldn't let me. I'm grateful to them. But, hello.
Yeah. And I mean, the scene when, Yoda's triumphant kind of lifting the X-Wing out of the swamp, like, I feel like that swelling of the music, that is kind of what sticks out to me about is like that triumphant moment amidst one of the darker Star Wars films. It has some of the kind of spookier moments in it, So I always like to point to like that scene in particular as being the standouts for me in Empire.
I cry every time I see Yoda in that whole sequence with him pulling out the X-wing. I cry every time. There's so much meaning and purpose of that good 3 minutes. It's so impactful.
I laugh every time we get to the introduction of Yoda because they put so much comedy in that scene.
I have to talk about this, like just Yoda's whole existence. I always think about this, get mad nowadays about Star Wars not being serious enough, and I'm like, they put a Muppet in Star Wars. Yoda is a Muppet. He was originally supposed to be reformed by Jim Henson. George Lucas wanted Jim Henson to be in it, but he was busy filming The Great Muppet Caper, which was, I think, the second Muppet movie, and he recommended Frank Oz for the job. And there's just so many good like Muppet Star Wars ties. Like, I believe there was a Star Wars episode of The Muppet Show earlier in the year in 1980. So the Show episode with Luke Skywalker in his spin outfit premiered in like February of 1980 and come out until December. So I just can only imagine like all of the speculation that was going on about what was going to happen, and just the fact that George Lucas and Jim Henson had such a nice little collaboration, and the fact that they put Yoda in it, and he's, you know, when you think about Yoda in Empire Strikes Back versus like, you know, Revenge of the Sith Yoda, you're just like, where does this person become this character? It's so funny, and I love Yoda.
They seem a bit juxtaposed.
The initial plans for Yoda actually are a little bit weirder. If you go back a little further, early in pre-production, they actually planned to use a monkey to play Yoda, and they actually created a very nightmare-inducing mask for this monkey to wear, and a costume was designed. But when they did the very first test footage of it on a mock-up of what would be Dagobah, the monkey was terrified and could not act. So they said, we need another option. And that's when Jim Henson Studios entered into the picture. And I think that's great. And if you ever get a chance to look at pictures of the set of Dagobah, it's two levels, because you have the level upon which Dagobah exists, and then the level where all the puppeteers are, because there was so many puppeteers involved in those scenes, and they almost drowned every time they'd film a scene because the whole stage was flooded. So it was quite hectic. It was very dangerous to shoot, and
they couldn't hear.
They can't hear anything. So
the story is that the director would direct Yoda instead of Frank Oz. And Frank Oz, I don't know what you're saying to me. Like, I'm the one who has to know.
Yeah, because he was not only the puppeteer, he was also the voice. So it was weird. I remember the first time I was steeped in the Muppets as a kid, and I remember when I first saw Yoda, I was like, "That's Fozzie Bear. What's going on here?"
I feel like I hear Miss Piggy every once in a while too.
Oh yeah.
I believe that the story that Mark Hamill had like to hear what Frank Oz was saying, and every once in a while Frank would like bring out Miss Piggy to like make him laugh or get him off track or something.
Muppets Star Wars episode of the Muppet Show had Miss Piggy like coming on to Mark Hamill in a couple of deleted scenes of it, and apparently Frank Oz got pretty raucous about it. So Miss Piggy saying some pretty heinous things.
That's awesome. Actually, Carrie Fisher once said that like right before they would start shooting a scene, sometimes like Lando would lean in and then like say something super dirty, like a dirty joke or something like that, right before the scene started, just to make people laugh because he thought it was hilarious. And she was talking about that at Celebration.
And knowing Carrie Fisher, she probably said something way worse.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
She don't even work.
Fully believe it. my favorite thing overall though in the whole film is how much lore we get about the Force. I think George Lucas has been on record saying that when he did A New Hope, he wasn't even thinking that the Force was going to be the main thing, and everyone just really latched onto it. But like Act One, we saw a Force ghost, and we saw him pull something to him in like two abilities. The first two things we see with the Force are things we've never seen before. And so and then they go into to train, and we're seeing the stuff that we just never thought was possible. And as a kid, I'm just like wide-eyed of like, what? Like
exploding.
I can honestly say, because I was into parkour for a long time, is Mark Hamill got me into parkour when he did a front flip over that log. I was like, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen. Oh, I'm gonna be able to front flip over so many things. Like
So Brandon, were you when he did that same flip in Book of Boba Fett, were you just like, yes, I remember that?
Absolutely. Also the spin in Book of Boba Fett that got me excited too.
Are you talking about the spin and the gunfight involving King Kong? That was the least useful thing ever I've seen on screen. It was completely pointless. I really did not like the Book of Boba Fett at all. It was just so much over the top nonsense that was out of place. But that's not what we're doing.
I still have to call out because it just makes me smile. Like it's so, you're just like, well, that happened. Meanwhile, but yeah, I mean this also, we got to see, like you said, the introduction of Boba Fett, and the bounty hunters meeting. That blew my mind of like, who are all these people? Does that guy have a diaper on his head? Like, why is he telling this guy no disintegrations? Like, I don't know. It was just really, really cool. And then the Exogorth as well. But yeah, I mean, was there anything else you guys wanted to call out about the second act, or do you just want to jump into the third?
Well, since you brought up the bounty hunters, I do love that all of those bounty hunters, except for Boba, who was completely custom built, and of course was IG-11 as well, or IG-88. I can never remember which IG droid it is. But Bosk, his flight suit, you see it in A New Hope in the cantina scene. It's the very same flight suit. And that very same flight suit, you see it in one of the earliest episodes of Doctor Who. It's reused. It's another example of the low budget side of Star Wars. And it's this hyper rare British high altitude flight suit that is almost impossible to find now. And the IG droid is made up of airplane parts, but you can't, if you go back and watch it, you can't see his feet. Because when they built him too tall for the set, so they had to cut a hole in the floor for him to fit.
I thought they had to drill him into the ground, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, he couldn't. He obviously didn't move, and he was way too heavy to let him freestand because he was out of balance. And he's just made from pieces of jet engines and airplane parts and whatever was laying around, which was in England in the 70s quite a bit. And I love that that's just reuse of stuff that they had laying about.
Yeah.
One thing I do like the callback from Empire Strikes Back from Attack of the Clones when Boba waits for the trash to go out to follow the Millennium Falcon because he saw his father get duped by Obi-Wan in Attack of the Clones. I like how that was a little callback in Attack of the Clones with that, and I just thought that was always cool that they included that. That's where Boba learned it from. Like, maybe I should wait for the trash and see if they float out with the trash. I thought that was always like a little cool callback to Empire there.
Yeah,
and it's funny that you say that, Rob, too, because from Empire Strikes Back's certain point of view, there's a story called "Wait for It" by Sarita Cordova, and it's literally about that, about him waiting for the right time to catch the Falcon. And in the audiobook version, that same book is narrated by John Hamm, and I actually met John Hamm last week in Los Angeles, so it was one of the coolest moments to be like, hey, you narrated one of my favorite short stories in Star Wars.
That's what you said to John Hamm, of all things.
I know.
Oh man, I love your audiobook reading. And he's like, cool.
But he hasn't heard that one before.
I mean, how often does he hear that? You know?
Yeah, right.
No, that is super cool. Two last things I gotta bring up. One, and I did make a TikTok about a long time ago, but I just picture how awkward the moment is of Vader and Boba Fett waiting behind those closed doors for them to come in for dinner, and like just there's a full dinner there, and it's just like, okay, all right, I'm gonna be standing here, and then the doors are gonna open, and I'm gonna say something cool, like, what should I say? Like, I now picture Hayden Christensen underneath there, just being like, oh man, this is gonna be so scary. I'm just gonna be like, who would be honored if you would join us? How's that sound? And he's like, yeah, man, that sounds super cool. Oh yeah. And then the other thing is Wilro Hood. It made it launched the most popular ice cream maker in history. And
The Hamilton Beach forecourt ice cream maker. I actually used to know the part number for it too.
And now it's canon. Now it's a Camp Dono. I just love that that's made all its way into canon.
When we were at Celebration, Chaco and I remember when they were running through the hallway by the live stage, everyone was chanting, ice cream, ice cream, ice cream. And there was at least 150 of them. It was insane.
I literally will not have lived until I have seen Wilro Hoods in person. Like, bucket list 100%.
The running of the hoods is amazing.
That's amazing. And then also one day, I don't know how it was arranged, but I saw so many people dressed up as Pink Shorts boom operator.
Yes, I saw a lot of those.
Somebody made a custom action figure of that as well.
Wow. Okay.
I love it.
Yeah.
But one thing I do love about this is this movie is like a pyramid, right? The first act, we get the broad scale war that's happening. Okay, that was weird. It looked like Rob was grinning again. We get this large scale war, and then we have like them in separate groups, and then the final act, it's so personal, and it's Luke and Vader. And I love how it just gets smaller and smaller and more cramped as the film goes, and even their final battle. So yeah, jumping into the final act, Luke arrives. We get the first mention of "It's a trap," which is said by Leia. She said it first. Yeah, what jumps out at you guys on the final act of the film?
I think how perfectly orchestrated Vader had everything planned. Like from the moment he got Han into the carbonite, and then the Imperial officer comes up, Skywalker just landed, Lord. Good. And then everything is just going the way he exactly wants it to. And I remember, so the scene where Luke arrives and he's walking through the corridor on Bespin, which, by the way, Bespin, most beautiful planet in Star Wars, 100%. When he's walking through, and then you see Boba Fett, and then while he's walking, you can see his head turn. Jeremy Bullock's head just turns and just keeps walking. So he was aware that he was there. So that was why he came out and started shooting at him when he kind of veered past the corner. But, Boba Fett, best character in Star Wars. Sorry. But the whole buildup of that Luke and Vader fight was just, it's so perfect. Like the coloring, how it's dark and then it lights up right when Vader starts talking, and you can hear his breathing in the background, and you can see his silhouette, and everything that leads up to it. It was just, I love this fight so much. And I love how Luke comes in with a blaster in his hand, and then he sees Vader. He walks up and he's like, this blaster's not going to do anything. puts it back in the holster, and then grabs out his daddy's lightsaber, and then he attacks first. I mean, that's the funny thing about that fight. It starts off with Luke attacking him, and then Yoda tells him that the Jedi use the Force for knowledge and defense, never for attack. But Luke attacks first, so that's the funny part of the whole start of the fight. And it just escalates so much, and then you get the Vader jump scare, because that's the typical Vader thing, is to have some flair when he's fighting or he wants to make an appearance.
So dramatic.
Essentially. And yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on this. I'll pass it to someone else.
That like him attacking first, and there were a couple of other scenes that were actually originally intended to be in the film, were supposed to be a lead into the third film where Luke became the bad guy. And they actually created posters where Luke's lightsaber was red to indicate that he was evil, because that was in the first drafts of the script. That was where they were going to go with it. They ultimately obviously abandoned it, but I think that is part of it. I think they may have still been originally intending to do that when they first started filming, because I don't know the shot order that they did for it. But of all the scenes in the final act of it, is the last shot of the film for me, is when you see the galaxy through the orbit. That's salt on velvet. That's all that is salt on velvet being rotated. And that they were able to pull off that shot with just salt and some velvet. Yeah. It's just a brilliant piece of special effect work. That's what stands out to me in films, and that's for that shot. I think that shot is just absolutely brilliant. The way that they matted everything, and then that they managed to pull that whole thing off with just a box of salt and some velvet, and you get that beautiful special effect out of it.
Yeah, to Mike's point about Luke turning to the dark side, that was originally the plan. That's why they were calling it Revenge of the Jedi instead of Return of the Jedi. So there are posters out there where that says Revenge of the Jedi in all red, and there's a Luke holding a red lightsaber on the poster. So that does exist out there somewhere before they changed it to Return of the Jedi, because George goes, the Jedi don't want revenge, and so that's why he decided to change that. But the whole thing about the third act is the sense of tension and suspense that's going on throughout the third act, because you're not sure what's going to happen. All you see is Vader is winning. Everything that Vader planned planned is going according to his plan. So you're like, how's Luke going to get out of this? Is Han going to be okay? Is Leia going to be okay? Is C-3PO ever going to get put back together? You have all these different thoughts going on while you're watching this third act, because it's full with tension and suspense. And then you have the music adding to that suspense. Then you have Luke finally getting into the chamber with Vader, and then it's like almost like completely black. You see like the silhouette of Vader, and then you just hear his breathing, and then everything lights up. The lighting of it helps accentuate that mood of dread. Like Luke is not going to be okay by the end of this fight. And that's what it's kind of foreshadowing at the very beginning, and it's just beautifully done. It's just masterfully done. That's why the Vader versus Luke fight in Empire is probably one of the best fights in all of Star Wars lore, because of how it sets up the story.
It is my favorite of all the fights. And then also I have to mention the scene where Luke jumps down, and where he lands, you see his head like bounce up at in the last frame that they cut. And then once you know that, you can never ever unsee it.
Yeah, one of my dad's favorite parts is after.
I appreciate.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Emily. And she's frozen now. Well, go ahead, Rob.
One of my dad's favorite parts of Empire is when after Luke gets his hand chopped off and he jumps down into the pit, you can initially see Mark Hamill's hand in the original shot, like the hand that was supposed to be cut off. You can see it if you look closely. That was one in the original tapes, but in the new editions, they actually edited that out. You can't see his hand anymore, but one of the original editions, you can see Mark Hamill's hand like popping through when he's sliding down the tube. And my dad always loves that. He always looks and tries to point that out in the film. He goes, "Oh man, they removed it." And I'm like, yeah.
You know, also the special editions do get their hate, but inside of Cloud City, where we get a lot more windows and stuff like that, I think it's a beautiful addition. I'm a fan of that. And we also get another surprise scene of we see Jeremy Bulloch outside of the uniform as well, briefly.
It's a trap scene. Yeah.
And we get Ian McDermott as Palpatine instead of that weird makeup lady who they just did weird makeup for her to be Palpatine, and then they replaced her with Ian McDermott instead, which I always thought was a good move. So yeah, they get their hate, but there were some really good changes that they made to the special editions. I think adding Ian McDermott to that scene was particularly good.
It's kind of hard to watch those scenes with the Emperor, knowing that when he's moving the chair, he's just scooting his feet to get the chair to move. And now knowing that, it just kind of makes the scene a little less dramatic.
I remember that. Ian was like, "Yeah, I just move my feet under my cape and."
Yeah.
Which I mean, it's kind of apropos when you consider there's that scene at the very end of Revenge of the Sith where Yoda's in the chair and his chair is rotating, but his feet can't touch the ground, and it's just a regular chair. There's like I don't know, man. Just go with it. Don't worry about it. No, I just kind of love that stuff. We also get that the scene of Han Solo being tortured. And someone posited this theory. I mean, that the torture was just to, the torture was to signal to Luke, essentially, like put his friends in danger so that Luke would film. And so when Han's like, he didn't even ask me any questions. You're like, damn, that's kind of hardcore.
Yeah, that's the brilliance of Empire Strikes Back. It's like when Han's getting tortured by this, third grade science project, Vader is aware that he knows that if he, it's like their stories are interconnected. Like you have Han, Leia, Chewie, and 3PO together, and then you have Luke on his own separate mission. And then when they go to Bespin, and then when Luke's training and that he sees a city in the clouds, and Yoda says, "You're seeing the future." And then he's like, "Will they die? Difficult to see. Always in the motion is the future." And then Luke decides, "Yeah, I gotta go because I know something bad's gonna happen to them." And that's Vader's doing. Vader knows that he can enter his mind and test if he doesn't come, I will keep on hurting your friends. But if you come, I will stop. But all Vader wants is him. And it's not just because he wants to fight him. He wants to turn him. He wants Luke to join him. So those two stories complement each other so well. With
Vader's out there playing 4D chess,
He is. He's playing to Jarek, and he's winning like Omega does in Bad Batch. And when they get there, like Luke immediately goes, and it's just. And then the whole thing with Lando too, that was a very important part too with Lando. Well, I mean, the Empire showed up on Bespin first, so he kind of had to. And I'm altering the deal. Pray I don't alter it any further. Blah 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 blah. But I find it so cool that Lando comes back in Return of the Jedi, and he's this big general, and he's a leader, and it's just like because when you see him in Empire, he's got a lot of swagger. He's the Baron Administrator of Cloud City. And he's like your typical good guy, but there's some points where you're like, is he a good guy? Because he said that he made a deal with the Empire that was going to keep him out of Bespin forever. And what do you know? It's Vader just popping up out of his chair, and then Boba's just hiding in the back. But there's so many twists and turns in this movie that just it's awesome. It's awesome.
Lando did nothing.
Oh no,
wrong.
he didn't do nothing. He didn't do anything wrong. But it was like, if he refused Vader, I fear what everyone would have done if they refused Vader.
Yeah, it doesn't normally work out well. But I do love that scene, like you said, because Lando, while he did capitulate, to Vader's whims, he still stood up. He stood up to Vader, which is not something normally people do. Like, hey, this is not what we agreed upon. Like, they're supposed to come with me and all this stuff. That being part of it. And then the other side of it is we also see Boba Fett also kind of talk back to, to Vader. And I just remember being a little bit like, is he just gonna kill them? Like, and he doesn't. But yeah, I mean that's largely the third act. Is there anything else we wanted to bring out? Make sure we bring up and talk about.
I'm surprised we haven't touched the "I am your father" scene. We haven't touched that once.
That was kind of important. Yeah, I get that.
It is a very, very heavily discussed scene, though. I mean, there's as many details as can be known about it are known, as far as I'm aware. But it is. I do love the public reaction to it, though, from the period, like when it was first released. It was the talk of everything when the movie first came out. That, oh my goodness, look at this! This is the biggest plot twist in film history at that point, or at least that's the way it seems to be. If you go back and read the contemporary magazine articles and articles written about the film, it was actually
and then no one believed it.
Yeah,
Right.
No one believed it. Even the fellow who played Darth Vader, he had no idea that it was going on. In fact, besides George Lucas and I think 2 other people, Mark Hamill was the only other person that knew what the line was going to be.
And he found out the day of shooting.
Yeah, they told him on the night, and they just kept it under wraps. And then, one more example of Disney keeping secrets, which in the film industry is very hard to do, but they're masters at it. They are very good at keeping secrets.
The best part of that story is hearing what Irvin Kershner said, the director. He said when they pulled Mark Hamill aside, he said, look, what I'm telling you, it's only 3 people know. Me, or 2 people know, me and George, and now you're the third. So if this ever gets out, we know it was you. And so I just love hearing that story about, how they kind of slightly threatened Mark way back in the day and how he was getting threatened again for, talking too much about the new sequels. So, it's just funny that some things never change.
I love I would just love to be David Prowse in that scene of like if that was David in the suit at that moment in time of like Obi-Wan killed your father, and then Mark's freaking out and he's like, I think you might be overdoing it, like
reacting to
you might want to pull back a little bit. And he's like, no, no, we got it. It's like, really? That? Okay.
I love the bits of footage of Chewie working on the Millennium Falcon and him and Han Solo going back and forth. But it's actually because they're doing lines and Han Solo and Harrison Ford has to react. It's actually the actor in the suit with his accent. And everybody that's ever seen that, you see the comments to it. I was like, I want to see this version of the film where Chewie talks like that through the whole film because it's hilarious.
There's also footage of David Prowse
with his thick Scottish accent.
And it is significantly less intimidating.
Rest in peace, Peter Mayhew. Yeah, the actor who played Chewbacca in the originals.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love that whole scene because I've had discussions with my close friends a lot about because they make fun of Luke's response with like, that's not true, that's impossible, and like him like yelling no and everything. And I'm like, it may seem like a bit corny, but it's like it's totally appropriate. Like this character, he's been looking for his father forever. Like he was split from his family when he was born. And then you fast forward 22 years later, and then that scene in A New Hope where Owen mentions his father, and then he's like, you knew my father? And his eyes just lit up. And then in this movie, he finds out who his father is, and he's just destroyed. He is ruined to find out that his father is the most evil human in the galaxy, and he's killed billions of people. And it's a terrible revelation for the main character that we love and support, to find out that our character is being defeated, but he also understands that what he is searching for was a total twist. And it's it's sad. It's sad.
Yeah.
It's
I-
sad now, but I don't think many people at the time even believed it. Like, I know my parents have specified me that when they like left the theater, they didn't believe Vader. They all thought Vader must be lying. And I mean, up until Empire, people didn't even know Vader's a human. In A New Hope, a lot of people just assumed he was like some scary robot. And I think that's why in Empire they show that scene of him with the helmet being to his
Chamber.
head to show people that he was in fact a human, because I think a lot of people thought that he wasn't. I think that's why I love Empire so much, because they're like slowly starting to break down Star Wars. He's this big scary interior, and then when we see him at the beginning of Empire, he's still has that grand dramatic like entrance as they're getting away at the last second, and you're like, oh, there's a bigger head. And the way that he talks to the Emperor in that scene, you're slowly starting to get kind of clues that he's maybe not
This guy's a middle manager.
all-powerful person. Yeah, he's the middleman. He's also kind of, he's also an employee who is being abused. He's abusing his employees. Like, he's, exactly as all-powerful as like believed before that. And it's actually sad, his conversation with Luke, where he says he's just I don't know, personally I feel like there's a little bit of like he's just a boy kind of in that line, not really, because Luke's really the first person Vader gives like a chance besides Padme. Him, like, everyone kind of immediately is like, you're in. He does say he'll join us or die, but he's not just immediately saying, I'm going to go kill this kid. He's kind of saying like, oh, maybe this will be good if he joins us.
Yeah. And that's why I love the end where we have the father son from across whatever distance that that is. I think that's a beautiful and powerful scene. But yeah, I mean, because we had a time jump in between the first movie and this, and so he finds out he's always looked up to his father and wants to escape and pilot and stuff just like him. And then he spends the next 5 years trying to teach himself how to do this, to avenge his father, to kill this dude, and yeah, this is it's beautiful how it all comes together, and how additionally, the first film, Luke is wearing white for most of it, as the innocent and the good guy. This time he's wearing a lot of gray, and so we're kind of getting into that kind of muddled space. There's a lot of really cool things that are very simple but still powerful in the overall storytelling, because George wanted this to be able to function as a silent movie, and it does. But all right, and so sounds like that's all the points we wanted to bring out for now. Any I guess we'll go around and we'll do this. And again, thank you guys all for coming out and joining me on this discussion. This has been a lot of fun. I love this movie and love hearing perspectives from different people, especially Rob being in the film industry, or both Rob and Mike being in the film industry. It's really cool to get those extra tidbits. But I want to kind of go around and close this out by having you guys let all the good people here in the chat and watching this in the future know, once again, where they can find you and your awesome content. If you have any closing thoughts, anything that we haven't touched on or anything like that, and then how did this film change Star Wars or film in general? forever going forward, either in the industry or for you personally. And we'll have us all kind of end with that. Um, and so for this one, I'm going to start with Rob this time.
Okay. Yeah. So the way Empire changed the industry is it became the template for every middle act sequel from here until from there on until now. Because anytime somebody does a sequel to a first successful film, they go, "Well, this film is like the Empire of our trilogy." They always like to invoke Empire because Empire is one of the greatest sequels of all time because of what it did and how it changed the narrative. Because most films back in that day, the hero won, the hero was happy. A New Hope ended with a celebration. They were celebrating. They just blew up the Death Star. They were successful. These tiny rebels had taken down Goliath, or at least we thought they'd taken down Goliath, and they were happy. But Empire ends on a much dour note. It's sad. Our heroes have lost. Luke has been injured. Han has been captured in carbonite. We don't know what his fate is, and they're overlooking the galaxy, and now they know, no, what's going to happen next. They left on a cliffhanger because we don't know what's going to happen next. With A New Hope, there was a cut and dry ending. With Empire, there was no such thing. It was left ambiguous, and so it just changed the industry that way. Because now, if you look at sequels and their templates, they all kind of carbon copy Empire, because Empire not only emboldened the scale of the film. Like, the scale was much bigger than A New Hope because the budget got bigger, but it also was a much more intimate and personal story, which a lot of these films try to emulate. Well, what they will do successful is they'll make the scale much larger, but they don't really capture the personal, intimate story that's being told in Empire. And so that's some things that that they'll learn. Because I remember specifically Age of Ultron that came out. They were saying how that was going to be the Empire of the Marvel franchise, and it succeeded in making the scope a lot bigger and the scale a lot bigger, but the story wasn't there compared to the original Avengers story. So that's my thoughts on that, just how it became the template for sequels going forward. That's how it changed the film industry, and just the way everything and how the filmmaking techniques that went into it, with the go motion, like Mike was talking about earlier, the props, the special effects, ILMs took their game to another level and became the dominant force in VFX in Hollywood. It's just it changed a lot in the industry. But my name is Rob. I'm a filmmaker from Detroit. You can find me anywhere on social media at Breezy2345. My first feature film is currently on Tubi and Amazon Prime. It's called Life Ain't Like the Movies. And that's it. I'm done.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming out for the first time being on here. Hopefully not the last time, because I absolutely want to bring you back for some more stuff. Thank you so much for coming out.
No problem
and how about you, Charlie?
Well, just like what Rob said, like Empire Strikes Back is the gold standard of the bridge like the bridge to the first act, and then the middle and the finale. It's the perfect segue into the finale with so much happening. The story gets twisted, the reveals, the characters. It shifted the landscape of Star Wars in so many ways. And when Vader revealed that he was Luke's father, that was the point where I was like, this is more than just a story. Like, there's so many real life references that are brought within these characters. Like the way Luke felt when he wanted to meet his real father. And Yoda, I use Yoda's teachings every day. Like, when he says luminous beings, are we not this crude matter? I take that as like, I'm a living being. I have so much light within me. I have to use it and spread it and show positivity to everyone else. I don't want to be worthless, essentially. I want to be able to be a part of something bigger than myself, and feel the force around me, and not be like nothing's impossible. That was essentially what that last scene with Yoda was about. And unlearning what you have learned, and that there's some things that can change, and some change for the better and some change for the worse, and that's the way I would go sometimes. And my last thought is, I love how what he learned with Luke learned with Yoda on Dagobah, with how he escaped and contacted Leia when he was hanging upside down on Bespin, because the first problem in the movie, he was hanging upside down in a Wampa cave, and now he's hanging upside down on a railing in front of this giant heat of gas pit. And how he doesn't talk to Ben, he contacts Leia. He trusts the Force, and he contacts his sister. Yeah, at the time he doesn't know that it's his sister, but he contacts her, and it's a great ending. And anyway, you can find me on TikTok at CharCharJ, and you can find me on Instagram and Twitter at the same handle, and you can find me at the Podwans podcast every Thursday night as we cover our Clone Wars rewatch. And you can find us every Friday on Stream Lounge as we have our Obi-Wan Kenobi rewatch.
Yes. And just to add to that, I will also be on Stream Lounge after their rewatch. I have agreed to co-host a stream of Revenge of the Sith. That's going to go late into the night. So if you're up late, stay up and party. We would be honored. How about you, Mike?
To add on to my colleagues, as far as the way that Empire Strikes Back changed things, is that it also changed production secrecy and set a metric for how productions maintain secrecy. No production had really tried as hard as Empire had to maintain that secret of the storyline, and it just kept going with all of Star Wars after that, because people were desperate to find out more about Star Wars. There were people that were beaten severely for trying to drop, spoilers outside of theaters when people were waiting to go in and see it. People became violent over it, and it set a metric for how a production maintains that secrecy. And it also set another metric about what productions do with property afterwards. After A New Hope was filmed, after initial production was done, everything from the productions, costumes, models, sets, props, all of it, went into a storage garage like you would, rent if you're moving, because nobody knew what the movie would do. Nobody cared. And at that time, no one concerned themselves with that stuff. Usually it was thrown in the trash. That place shut down, and almost everything from A New Hope was thrown in the garbage. And it was just mostly destroyed. Well, after Empire was done, they made the conscious decision, Lucasfilm did, to archive everything, so that it would just, because they started to realize that even that stuff can give away story. So nothing was being discarded from Lucasfilm. So it was just another way in which they were maintaining that metric of production secrecy that started with Empire Strikes Back. And I think that's kind of what started the tremendous value of a lot of that stuff, and it actually helped spur on the collecting market of props and film ephemera from that time period. And that's my final thought there. But I can be found anywhere on social media at Props to History, from YouTube to Facebook to Instagram, Twitter, etc. And I'll also be at C2E2 in Chicago, August 5th through the 7th. And I will also be a guest at Silicon at the end of August, Adam Savage's con in San Jose.
That is awesome. So everyone here, after this ends, make sure to go over to his YouTube channel, give him a follow as well. Thank you so much for coming out. This was great. And then last but certainly not least, we have Silmaril Minley. Ah, damn it.
They're so close. So close. Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's pretty all the ways that this not only changed Star Wars, because, it solidified it as a trilogy, as something that needed an end, because kind of it could have stood on its own. They had all plots of the story, and then it ends with a little happy ending. Everybody gets. So I like that. It's a little darker, like everybody else mentioned. It doesn't end on as high of a note. It kind of has like a hopeful tone at the end, but it's definitely, seeing our heroes starting off the next movie, kind of at a loss bottom. So making it a little bit darker, it kind of solidifies Star Wars as camp, with the inclusion of Yoda and some of the just hokey lines, and I feel like it doesn't take itself too seriously, even though it is a little bit kind of tone. It just proves that, like, it doesn't always need to be super intellectual, even though it is, and you can read it that way, but it also can just be fun, and it can be what it is. I like that it sets up a lot of different, callbacks that we see when, the prequels come out and sequels. But yeah, I think it's wonderful, and you can find on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter at Summer Emily. And I'm happy to be back. I hope to be back again soon. So
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for coming. You're always welcome. Yeah, and for me, I think everyone kind of touched on it, but like the way that this film and this franchise, but specifically this film, captured the imaginations, because A New Hope did capture imaginations. I'm not saying it didn't, but there was something special about this one and the way it captured that with the species and things that are involved, but with the Force and the setup of this magic system. And so many filmmakers around cite this film as the reason they wanted to get into acting, get into writing, get into like prop building. And it's interesting to have these specific, a lot of things are like throwing pebbles into a pond. This is like throwing something, a dam into a river that forever changes the future course of that river. And so yeah, that's why I love it. I wish I could go back in time and see kind of how things were before. I'm not sure I want to, but this and Terminator 2 are the greatest sequels of all time, in my opinion. I'm not gonna make y'all choose, but
The Dark Knight too. We can throw the Dark Knight in there as well.
The Two Towers.
Yeah, Two Towers.
yeah. All right, I'm gonna have to make a poll. Stay tuned, everyone. I will make a TikTok poll. We'll see this. Maybe we'll toss in the Alien franchise as well. But all right. Thank you guys once again for coming out to hang out with me. Everyone in the chat. We have Zulusa Mare in here. We have Diana Divorce. We have Pep in here. Darren Calvin. We have Dixon Download. We have Gorilla Coffee Works. We have Isaac Church. We always have such an amazing group of people. Brian with a beard. We have some robot with like a sex adult like chat site. Thank you for your patronage. I don't know. Luke from the Podwans podcast, Expo Studies, Forward into the Black. Everyone, I appreciate all of the support. Please, give this a like. It does help a lot. And yeah, we will go on to the next